see?
It's probably me.
Oh, there you go, muted. How
Yeah.
are you?
Anytime I change from a Teams channel, a Teams meeting to Zoom, I lose my connectivity. So
Yeah,
at least I'm
I
not
find
upside
it's the
down
same
because
thing.
that's happened.
Yeah, I find that happens all the time. They don't play nice together sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Anyway,
yeah.
listen, I'm really glad you're taking the time to talk with me. Now I've done a little bit of background information, etc., but let
Mhm.
me explain what I'm doing here. I'm an
Okay.
independent third-party analyst, industry expert in this area, and in analyzing companies like AdaptOne or ProcureTech providers. I only do that when I'm given free and unrestricted access to talk one-on-one with their clients to get
Mhm.
not, I'm not looking for this is why it was great and this is what we accomplished, the usual thing, because everyone can talk about, but an understanding as to how you discovered Adapt One, why you chose them, what were some of the challenges with implementing them, what were some of the good things that came in, and then an overall assessment. So those are the 5 points I really want to
Okay.
touch on, Millie. So, I mean,
Okay.
how did you come across Adapt One?
We kind of identified a need that we were collecting all this information from our suppliers, and we were doing it in multiple different corporate departments and then asking the same information over and over again from our suppliers, right? And so we started having we kind of identified the need to say, well, we're asking our subcontractors and suppliers for the same information 15 times, right? Like that's not sustainable.
Right.
Um, and so we kind of started looking at what other companies were doing. And then we also, because of the industry we're in, right, like we recognize that a lot of our clients were going to registration portals, right? Places where they were collecting the data online and then using that information as a business instead of, you know, the HR department asking for something, the legal department asking for something, health and safety asking for something. And so we started looking in this space to say who's in this space. And it was actually one of our clients that we registered in that was using Adapt One. That's how we discovered them, right? And we were registering in that client's portal and we're like, this is easy. This is kind of what we want. And so as part of our down selection process, we met with Adapt One, and that's where we ended up going with Adapt One, right?
Right.
So,
Well, you know what's interesting about that? Because people spend a lot of procure tech solution providers spend a lot of money to put out brochures and get exposures, et cetera, like that. But it sounds like where you came to it was basically word of mouth. I don't know if that's the best way of saying it, but you used it, you tried it. It wasn't any kind of a sales. Here's a brochure or a conference. It was basically, hey, we use it, we tried it. Who do you use? I mean, is that a
yes,
safe
exactly.
statement?
Yeah, absolutely, right? Because again, the space that we work in, right? A lot of our clients have similar processes as we do, right? We're a sub-consultant to them.
Right.
Um, so we interacted in a lot of different client portals, right? Ariba, like we knew we weren't going to do that. Like there were some platforms where we were like, there's no way. They are not user friendly. They are not tailorable. We cannot operate in that space. And we would never ask our suppliers to do that. So yeah, like we had firsthand like hands-on experience of our one of our clients platforms that they had developed. And we were like, that's what we need. We need something like that to take care of a specific business need that we had. Yep.
Right. Now, how much customization, how was it dealing with AdaptOne? Let me go first there. When you made the decision to work with them,
That's one of
how
the
did you
reasons we
find?
decided to work with them, right? It
Okay.
was completely customizable to what we needed to operate as a business, right? Um, and that's one of the another reason that we didn't go to one of the big providers at first, right? Like that we operate in a not a unique industry, but we don't manufacture anything. We don't, we don't buy widgets. We are a service organization. And so the information that we need from our suppliers is different. And, you know, the industry is different, right? We're closer to like a law firm or, you know, an architectural firm than, you know, manufacturing anything. So the information we needed was to meet our client requirements. And so it becomes like the client requires of us, we require it of our supplier, right? So um, that's one of the main reasons we selected AdaptOne, because again, we knew that they were customizable, right? To completely design it the way we wanted it to work, right? Not the, I mean, the basic framework of all supplier registration is the same, right? But like being able to say, no, we want it to have this
Oh,
workflow, right? And
okay.
not be stuck in no, it has to go A to B, right? Like
In other words, the
became
system
super
adapted
important.
to you. It adapted to you
Yes.
rather than you saying, "Here's the system. Now you got to fit to that." Okay, so
Yes.
I've got this is sort of a two-part question. The first
Okay.
part is how long did it take from decision to actual utilization? And what were some of the challenges that you encountered that you didn't expect? How were they dealt with? And then we can go into the other part of again, where you're going with the
Um,
DAP one.
I mean, I feel like it probably took us longer than AdaptOne, right? Like, and I feel like that's a common thing, right? Like, ooh, wouldn't it be great if it did this? Wouldn't it be great if it did this? And so we were the ones that were kind of like dragging the design out, like, right? Like we'd see something and we'd be like, oh, it does that? Like, can we do this too? And of course, AdaptOne says yes, but then that just delayed deployment.
Right,
But even after deployment, right? Like for the most part, our deployment went seamlessly, right? Like we had done enough testing and um process workflow that the testing and implementation was seamless, right?
right,
But I don't know how much you know about a relationship with AdaptOne, but we then added on many different modules after that. We were like, oh, hey, here's supplier registration. Let's do that. Hey, let's do purchase orders in that, right? We have all our supplier information in there. Let's go ahead and issue contracts in AdaptOne and just push the information to our ERP. And then we added invoices on top of that, right? So it really was a continual like growth for like changing. So and really like I felt like that's one thing that we did make sure of, right? And it to say this, right? Like you'll understand this. Like when I first joined Geosyntec, right, we didn't have any kind of purchasing system. So we didn't have a bunch of purchasing data to migrate into the
right,
system. So we had kind of a clean slate at that point. Yes, we had lots of supplier information and we had to do a legacy load of data for suppliers, but not for purchase orders. So we were able to relatively quickly just like, oh, we have all our supplier data. Let's create purchase orders in that system, right? And then it just became a natural like follow on to say, let's process invoices in there because it's so much easier than our current ERP. So
Was there a continuity, I guess, that the challenges were then minimized? I'm gathering, but was there, even as you expanded it and moved out, um, did you find a consistency throughout the whole development I mean, it sounds like you're an ongoing relationship of evolution rather than
yes.
here it is, plug it in, turn it on, and we'll see you.
And that was by choice, right?
Right,
Like because they did such a great job, like for that, we're like, oh, this works so much better
right,
than what we had, right? Like, and like I said, we did have vendor data, obviously, that was in our ERP. But again, we were collecting pieces of information. Health and safety had their own thing over here. Legal had their own thing over here. Accounts payable needed W-9s over here, right? So that's one of the reasons that drove us to the supplier registration part. But then it really was like, like what, like I think you'll understand this. Like when I first started with Geosyntec, I was like, you guys don't even have purchase orders. Like, why do you need a purchasing manager? Like, you guys don't even like no that when you have an invoice and you pay from an invoice, that's a check request. Like, you don't need a purchasing manager. Like, so yeah, like that's when I started with Geosyntec. So,
Okay, so
but
you really had a blank slate to start. You remind me of
oh,
Logitech a little bit.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So that
So
so now in terms of going forward, I mean,
yep.
are you at the do you integrate other solutions into there? Do you have other applications that sort of tie into AdaptOne and how do those work out?
And that's the part that, I don't know if Holly shared with you. We recently just moved from AdaptOne. We've moved into Coupa, right?
Right?
And some of that is because we have now at this point like had such exponential growth that one of the reasons we moved from AdaptOne was because of, just the volume of transactions that we're going through, right? Like we had to come up with a solution for, and so we've moved to Coupa at this point, right? So we have gone to one of those like, no, it's cookie cutter. This is what you get,
Yeah.
which is very difficult, right? We just went live with Coupa probably in November, and the business is still like, well, why can't we go back, right? But at the same time, right, like the transaction of invoices, it really just became like we needed a that cookie cutter process,
Right.
to sustain the growth, right? And so like I feel like, you know, there is this like sweet spot for AdaptOne in this like mid-sized company that is operating and like, trying to gain efficiencies or whatever. But at some point, like it just became like we would have to create all of this, right? Like we would have to develop an OCR scanning service. We would have to, that didn't exist, right? And so going to a solution like Coupa that like suppliers upload their
In other words,
invoices and we pay from that solution, right? So
right. You came basically you grew and expanded. And
yes,
now AdaptOne, so you're not working with AdaptOne anymore at this point. You kind
right.
of made that transition. Um, so that's where you say the size of the company and the volume
Mm-hmm.
that goes through, inevitably there has to be an adoption. So let me ask you this.
Yep.
What did you take away from your AdaptOne experience that helped you with Coupa implementation or is helping you? And how easy was it to migrate from AdaptOne to Coupa?
Um, I mean, we definitely learned, right? Because again, that's where we kind of started with AdaptOne that in any of these systems, right? Like you cannot forget your suppliers, right? Their experience in your system when you're asking them to um give them all this data is just as important as our experience, right? And we did learn that from AdaptOne, and we did, think at the beginning, like I said, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we added this and we could ask them for this and we could get this. And then the feedback from our supply base was like, this takes forever. Like we can't complete this. And we were like, oh, so we learned that from AdaptOne. And then we were able to modify it, right? So again, we took that knowledge into Coupa, right? Like, okay, we have to be very careful when what we're asking for to make sure the business actually needs it. And it isn't just like wouldn't it be nice to have this information? And so like that understanding that, your suppliers are an extension of your business. We learned that from AdaptOne. We migrated that into our Coupa experience. And then, moving the data was easy, right? Like it was
Okay.
mapping this field to this field in the systems. And AdaptOne absolutely helped us do that as well. So yeah.
One final question. What is the maximum volume spend or throughput that you see an AdaptOne can handle uh, in terms of that?
Um, it I don't know if it's dollar value because it
Okay.
depends on the spend. It really became for us transactional,
And how
right?
much
Like,
transactional volume? Because that's
yeah,
very important because it's not
yeah,
always dollars. It's a matter
yeah,
of processing.
yeah. Because you could have $1 million of one transaction and that's
Right.
easy, right? It really did become like we're at, we're probably about 60,000 invoices, a year. And it just became too much for that connection between our ERP and then really just the impact to the invoicing process to our organization, right? When we started to do like time studies of like how long does it take an operational person to do an invoice, and it was 3 or 4 minutes, and you're doing 60,000 invoices, and our practitioners bill out at $200 an hour, that becomes significant to the business, right? Because your practitioners, our engineers don't want to spend that time processing invoices. So again, that it isn't, I don't think it's a dollar value. I think it is transactional, right? Like the
At
churn
what
in the
point?
system.
At what point? So
Um,
60,000 was a lot, but at what point of transactional volume of invoices per year was the point where the lights went out,
I think it was probably about 45,000, right?
45,000?
We're just like, and really the last couple years for us, right? Like from, just to give you a little background from Geosyntec, it probably started probably in 2018, 2019, 2020. We were acquired by Blackstone. And their philosophy of like, we started acquiring other companies, and that also played into it, right? Like the acquisition and trying to integrate their data and getting them like, you
Yeah.
know, became like, just like, and adding all their invoices in that process, it would just like, this can't be sustainable. Every time we acquire a company that we then, have this huge spike, because it wasn't like flatline growth. It was like, and then, that's really when it became an issue for us, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It's the consolidation by merger and acquisition of
Yes.
legacy technology and systems. And that's why I was
Yes.
looking at that number. So I guess would it be safe to say, and by the way, what ERP system do you utilize?
Well, that we currently use what's called BST Global, which again is a A&E space ERP. It's very centric to our industry, but we're also going through a ERP change, right? We're looking at implementing a new ERP as well. So we're changing everything. It's great.
No,
I'm
okay,
just
so
kidding.
with the
I'm just kidding.
ERP, if I can ask you, who are you looking at in terms of ERPs?
We are actually have made that selection, and we're
Okay.
going with N4. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
that's who we're going with. Yep.
So
So
you know what? I guess the experience you could say take away to some of AdaptOne was the right solution at the right time
yes,
to deliver the right service and create the infrastructure understanding. Ultimately, and it's always good, companies have to grow and expand, and eventually,
yeah,
you get out of that range of that. So, Melanie, thank
yep,
you. You've given me a great deal. I want you to know I'm recording this interview and writing, and I'll
yep.
report it back, and I'll be sharing it with my readers. But I appreciate the frankness because I think far too often when we talk about client experience, it's always this good thing and here's what we've done and whatever else without getting into the real journey and understanding. So I really appreciate that.
No, and I do want you to know, like that is one of the things I valued probably the most of working with AdaptOne is the just the group of people that they have, right? Of like really understanding, taking the time to understand our business and not just, oh yeah, we can make it work, right? They really did invest time and dedicate resources to making sure it worked, right? And that is a differentiator, I would say, about AdaptOne. So
Well, Millie, thank you so much for
yeah,
your time. I'll
you're
tag you
welcome.
when I share this, and I really appreciate the input.
Okay.
Take
Yep. Thank
care.
you. Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye.